Hi everyone, I hope you've all been well. Today is the 8th of May 2024, and Hirsch Sahar here, of course, reporting from Auckland. And yes, this talk video is one I've actually wanted to do for a very, very long time. It's about a topic I read about quite a while ago. I think about probably 10 years ago, even more than 10 years ago. But it is the extremely wrong prediction of Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus, who was an English economist and I think also politician who lived in the 17 and 1800s, he made the prediction that even back in those days, this is basically when the world's population was about 1 billion, give or take, certainly much less than the 8.2 billion it is today. But back in those days, when the world's population was around 1 billion, he made the prediction that as the world's population was increasing, it was increasing at a rate that was greater than the agricultural output. So in other words, the population was increasing by more than the production of food, and therefore you'd reach a point where you've got more people than food, or not enough food for all the people. And just also about that concept that the Earth, of course, is a finite place, regardless of how large it can seem. And land is, of course, limited, and therefore so are resources, such as food and water. And if our population keeps on increasing, obviously we're going to hit a point one day when we would have exhausted basically everything. We won't have anything left for anyone, and we'll basically all die, right? And of course, a lot of people believe that. And he basically came up with that concept. This was all the way back, like when he lived in the 17 and 1800s. And I think he was a politician as well, and he exercised his power in basically a way which back then he thought he was doing the right thing, but now we know was completely wrong. He was basically saying that our population is growing, the world population is growing, and it's growing too fast, therefore it needs to come down. Even back then, it was only around 1 billion. And he predicted that as it grew, standards of living would come down immensely because of, the food and land and resources being limited. And as we've seen, population since then, even, this is less than 300 years ago, this is about 250 years ago, population has skyrocketed, going from around 1 billion to over 8 billion. And actually, as a result, standards of living have increased dramatically. Standards of living have increased dramatically. Not only do we have 8.2 billion people, but overall, they are living much better lives. Of course, there is poverty, and of course, there are those who hugely unfortunately don't have access to the basics. But there are many who not only have access to the basics, but have access to much, much more. So it's amazing. Thomas Malthus was completely wrong. And how did that come about? Well, really through technology. When we were able to, say farm more efficiently, when we were able, to, have one technological breakthrough after the other, which increased our standards of living, say the advent of electricity, or much easier transportation, much better housing, healthcare, medicine, all that, that obviously helped us immensely. And of course, there's still a lot of resources left in the world. There's still a lot of vacant land to develop. There's still a lot of land, full stop. And I'm not saying that we need to not focus on population at all. It is still a concern today because, at 8.2 billion people, it is obviously a number that we need to certainly keep a bit of an eye on. But like I said in a previous talk video, it's not just the number of people, it's really how much they consume, how many, how much resources or how many resources, or how much they consume, and of course, how much they pollute as well, and you might remember that example I gave of the average American. If everyone in the world consumed as much as the average American, would need 5 Earths to sustain us, and which of course we don't have. And America is only about 5% of the current population, even less than that. But if everyone in the world consumed as much as the average African, we could probably make do with just say 2 continents. You might remember me saying that in a previous video. And yes, it's a very, very good point that I still stand by. But at the same time, of course, the more and more people you have, chances are you will have, resource consumption and pollution increasing, at least to some degree, unless of course you bring technology to solve it, and that's of course what I will vouch for. But it's still population, still just keep a bit of an eye on. It's not everything, but I still think it's something we need to keep an eye on. But coming back to this Thomas Malthus, that whole concept that there's not enough to go around, that there's only this much in the world. So the more people you have, the less there is for everyone else, or the more someone takes, the less there is for the rest, for everyone else. And that's not actually always the case because again, through technology, through good organization, through good governance and law, and order and all those things, we can actually make the most of the resources we have. We can make our usage of them both very efficient as well as very effective. And that's exactly what's happened. So Thomas Malthus was wrong. He was immensely wrong. And not only that, his policies and the concepts he brought about, actually made the lives of many, many countless people much worse because what he also endorsed was, forced sterilizations and even the forced killings of many people, especially those in the East, those in Asia, especially I think those in Africa too. And that's actually, what he, proposed. That's actually what he encouraged. And of course, many died as a result. Many suffered and many perished as a result. So not only was this prediction immensely wrong, but it resulted in a lot of suffering, too much suffering. And I think it's definitely a very good lesson to learn because we don't want history to repeat itself. And even today, even with 8.2 billion people on the planet, it's something we need to know through technology, through better organization, through better laws, just through everyone doing their part. We really can, make more out of less. We really can do that. A sort of one example off the top of my head is having a talk with a friend not too long ago about another friend we knew who's a property investor, who's accumulated a lot of properties and he wants to buy more. And you might think, Jesus Christ, when will enough be enough? From if I remember correctly, he had 13 properties, and we're thinking, and he wants to buy more, and he wants to keep expanding. But you might think, oh my God, it's greed. When is enough? Enough. You're already earning more money from passive income than you need to live on, so therefore you don't even work. And you know, um, leave some property for the other people. You may have 13 properties, but don't forget, believe it or not, there are people who don't even have one. What about them? And I can see that point, but also if you look at it, those property investors, they demand properties, right? They buy properties, and if there is demand for properties, then of course there will be a supply of properties. If no one demanded or bought properties, then no one would be producing or building properties. So as they demand more, there's more building as well. And then as more properties are built, there's actually more properties available for everyone else. That's how it works. Also, as there are more property investors, they provide housing for more people, so it helps tenants, at least theoretically, but also you see that a lot in practice. It's a bit like, those who consume a lot or who buy a lot, we might look down on them because they're consuming a lot, they're buying a lot, but they also contribute to the economy. Only if there's a buyer is there a need for a seller. So they contribute to people's businesses, they contribute to people's incomes, they contribute to well-being. And again, it's another sort of concept that we need to remind ourselves about. It all works together, doesn't it? It's a whole system. And also, don't forget, some property investors develop property as well, whether they develop it from scratch or whether they buy rundown properties and completely do them up, or even say abandoned buildings and completely do them up. And again, they're adding to the housing supply, and by doing that, don't forget they're involving builders, they're involving mortgage brokers, so they take out a loan, a mortgage. They'll be using insurance companies when they have insurance on those properties. They will no doubt be using cleaners for those properties. When they rent out the properties, they're probably going to be used property managers to manage the properties. The list goes on. So even through them consuming or buying, many people benefit all the supplies of every single thing they consume. So, but coming back to Thomas Malthus, yes, he got it very wrong. I remember reading in a book, it's known as one of history's worst predictions. He thought that as a population grew, even when it was only around 1 billion in the 1700s and 1800s, he predicted that as the population grew and outpaced the agricultural output, eventually things would get much worse for everyone and would all starve to death and just run out of resources. But as we saw, even since then, population has skyrocketed, and in fact, standards of living for many, many people the world over have increased dramatically just from more efficient and effective use of the resources we have. And of course through implementing technology, all the technological breakthroughs we've had since then. And of course through international trade and through better organization and better laws, better law and order, and then of course things like medicine, improved health and hygiene. So, and that might have not been, that probably wasn't very obvious, back then when Thomas Malthus, made his prediction. And, as you've already heard, many suffered as a result through, forced sterilization and even forced killings of those in the East who he regarded as inferior and who he thought should die so the others, could have enough and survive. So yeah, a horribly wrong prediction. Definitely something to take note of. It's definitely something we should all learn about, something we should all learn from. And of course, we should make sure that never happens again. Because I know people might joke about history saying, oh, you can't live in the past, past is gone. But hey, as they say, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And that is probably why history does repeat. So let's make sure that certainly this does not repeat. Let's learn from Thomas Malthus's mistake and make sure that what he caused never happens again. Thank you.